Like you can get hacked today and then also get hacked at the end of the week, right when you get your systems up
Yo,
and running.
dude, I think there have been stories of hackers who've hacked a company and then like they'll get some ransom and then like a week later they're like, "Yo, I'm back." What is good, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Our Future Podcast, where me and my co-founder, Simran Sandhu, break down young entrepreneurs making tons of money and look at industries that have a ton of potential. We found the cheat code. It is indeed the cybersecurity market. With the CrowdStrike incident lately and the Google's potential acquisition of Wiz for $23 billion, there's just way too much cash. And we've looked at the stats. These are fucking mind-boggling. We're going to get into those of like where this industry is going. And there's probably a lot of ways you can capitalize, and we'll try our best, but this is all about cold hard cash. Nobody's passionate about cybersecurity. I doubt it. All right. There's a lot of cash in that shit. What do you think, Simi?
Dude, 100%. It's a boring space, but so much money. We've got to start by talking about CrowdStrike. Now, the ironic thing about CrowdStrike, and I imagine a ton of people know about this now since apparently our entire world runs on CrowdStrike and Microsoft, but their primary job, they do a bunch of different things, but their primary job is helping prevent security breaches and hacks. So it's only ironic, the fact that, like, granted, they didn't have a breach or a hack. It was just like their own internal error, but like that was effectively what happened. It felt like a breach, and now like they took down all these massive companies with them.
Bro, yeah, they literally sunk the entire market overnight. I guess my only knowledge of CrowdStrike really is like some like frat dude who moved to Austin to like sell CrowdStrike software, and like based on that, I wouldn't bet on the company because those dudes are always like sitting in a tube, like having a drink in the Austin River. Like, I don't know if they're really grinding like that, but I don't think they're the people that were responsible. They're just, probably people trying to shill it, trying to get deals. But
dude, for real. I mean, I don't know who pushed this update internally, but man, it's probably been one hell of a weekend for him. Like I was watching CNBC and the founder, George Kurtz, was on there, and he was just like super sad. Like, first off, he was getting roasted really, really bad because he like issued a notice where he like was saying that he acknowledged the situation but didn't apologize and didn't mention anything about his users. It was kind of a cocky statement to put out. And then he came on CNBC looking all sad and stuff. And, Jim Cramer's like trying to bust his balls a little bit. And he's like trying to get him to say something good, but he's just like super sad and monotone.
Okay. But it's probably a best case scenario that a cyber company, the leading cyber company, makes an internal error that has somebody hack them. Because that would be even more of a massive, hit to the company's reputation. And what's also interesting about this is Microsoft is involved, right? Like it was some connection between CrowdStrike and Microsoft's cloud. And Microsoft was very quick to wash their hands of this shit and just be like, yo, it wasn't us, it was them.
Yeah.
And, they were obviously, getting out from under the gun, but CrowdStrike really fucked up. But at least it wasn't the worst case scenario by any means, right? Like there's going to be
I agree. I mean, they can bounce back from this.
Yes.
Yeah, I agree. They can bounce back from this. It's, and that they were making a clear point of that on his interview with CNBC, where they were essentially like, if this was an actual security breach and someone had hacked into this, again, when their entire platform is built on threat prevention, that would be really, really bad. I think what most people are surprised by is like just how entrenched they are. We have this good friend Ritwick, and apparently, airports and banks, all of these different businesses were impacted by this. But he was like traveling back to San Francisco, and there was this TV, the ones at the gate where they essentially, highlight the city that you're going to and the time, and we'll give you the status of the flight, and it just had that blue screen of death. And he's like, dude, out of all places I could have been stuck at, how the hell did I end up in Columbus, Ohio, of all places? And so, yeah, I just thought it was super funny.
Dude, I'd rather be in Liberia than fucking Ohio. Like if I had to be
yeah, dude,
you're just seeing the rainbow wheel of death on the thing, and it's like, oh my god,
yeah.
The whole world is getting hit right now. Dude, it's crazy. You remember like in high school, like there'd be a hack like once a year, like the Equifax hack was huge. Do you remember that? And that was
Yeah.
particularly sensitive because it's around credit and identity theft. And then there was a Target one. But like now I feel like we're hearing about one of these attacks every week. And I think it's because, criminals with any level of sophistication are no longer robbing banks. They're robbing companies and holding their software and tech ransom. Like, did you hear about the CDK Global hack that just happened with the auto dealerships? Like, nobody could sell cars. like,
Yeah.
people were literally like writing down, like, okay, like this family's buying this car, like on a piece of fucking paper. Like, it actually goes to show like the fear around AI that like we truly are so dependent on these platforms in the cloud and software and data. Like we literally become cavemen without this shit. You know what I mean? Like you're literally bean counting on a piece of paper without some of these softwares.
Agreed. And it's funny, the ransom analogy I think is very true. But there's no rhyme or reason to these hacks. It's just like I feel like these hackers just wake up one day and they're like, you know what? This sounds like a great company to go after. I think like there was this recent news with AT&T too, where like millions of people had their info breached into, and these hackers took it over. And I just like, this is insane. Truly, it's every single day now. Going back to the CrowdStrike, example, that not being a security breach, and like they're down almost 20%, from a valuation standpoint or their market cap. And they're currently valued at $74 billion. So, just went down this rabbit hole. And what I learned is that, so endpoint security, so this would be anything related to protecting endpoint user devices. So think like laptops, desktops, phones. This is a fast growing market. It's expected to reach $30 billion by 2032. And out of that, I was like, there's just so many opportunities that I see. One thing that, doesn't necessarily play into the software side of this, I think people can think about are these incident response services. So, you have all these services, businesses and agencies that exist in like the sales tech world, right? Like all these like Salesforce implementation firms and things like that. I think that, the prime area to go start one of these businesses is in cybersecurity, because that was the big issue around CrowdStrike, right? For a lot of these companies, they just couldn't issue like a this on-air software update to fix everything. They have to send like technicians in person to client sites to go fix this. And I was like, wow, like I bet a lot of these enterprise companies would totally be willing to pay for these consultants to be around 24/7, so if anything like this happens ever again, they can fix it pretty quickly and promptly. Because like take like a big Fortune 500 company being down for 2 days, like that's probably billions of
That's
dollars in
billions of
impact. Like
dollars.
they're gonna
Yeah.
have to issue an update about that in their quarterly earnings.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
When like there's a crime, like you have like so many different agencies of the government pull up. It's like the FBI, the fucking, the special crimes unit. There's like whatever,
Yeah.
CSI or whatever. Like it's the same with this shit. Like they're going to bring in hella experts to like try and figure this shit out. Like they probably just won't go with one firm. Like they probably need a lot of opinions and a lot of people working on this like at the exact same time. This is a little unrelated, but did you hear about that Ashley Madison documentary that went out on Netflix?
No, tell me about it.
So essentially, Ashley Madison was a site for like married people to have affairs. And people were just so dumb, I feel like, about their data and anonymity back in the 2010s. Like, dudes would just sign up with like their name and like their address. Like, it was completely public. Like, they didn't even pretend to be somebody else. And the CEO of the company was like the super polished, like Christian, well-intentioned guy. And he had his wife, and they would go on, these news channels and be like, we believe in this platform. We think it's like a good thing for the world. We're making a ton of money. And some hackers were like, we've got all the data. We're going to leak it unless you, shut down your company. So they didn't even want any money. They just wanted them to shut down the service. And when they didn't shut it down. And when they released all the records, the CEO was having so many affairs
That's
on
insane.
the platform.
Oh my gosh. Talk about like dog feeding his own company. Bro is an end user.
Yeah, that guy's like the true definition of dog feeding a company. But they brought in a ton of experts to try and figure that out in the heat of the moment. And I think a lot of companies have no choice but to spend a ton of money in that situation. As many firms, as many experts as they can, to come in and try and fix what's going on, because there's no amount of money that can like, they can't spend too little money, on something like that. There's just so much demand.
It's super
urgent.
consequential.
It's super urgent.
Yeah, super urgent, super consequential. I don't know. I also think that as it relates to like cybersecurity, most of it is fear mongering. Like when people sell in this space, it's kind of around this exact thing, which is like, you can't afford to be hacked. But like we have heard of people who have reframed this whole thing with their companies and have also done really really well. We have this buddy Taylor Hersom, and his
Yeah,
whole
yeah.
thing is like, you need to invest in cybersecurity so you can go win more contracts. And so there's a bunch of different ways to play this, and that framing I think is so important in this, right? Like I think if you were going to go build a services firm of some kind around this, you 100% could do it around this CrowdStrike thing, and I think that's what other people will do. But I wonder what that unique framing could be for you, where it's like, like it actually, like, we help add ROI to you in some capacity.
Yeah.
Like, not only do we protect you from hacks, but like by using us, you will make money some way. Again, there's a lot of nuances here, so probably not the best people to speak on it, but I think it's worth researching and thinking about.
Well,
But I
dude, there's
think
just like
the
I
yeah.
just need to like tell you like a few stats I found, and I'm sure you found some like really interesting ones as well. All right, so global cybersecurity market is 182 billion in 2023, expected to grow to 314 billion by 2028. So 180 billion to 314 billion in 5 years. That's nearly doubling in 5 years. And
Yeah.
so 35% of CISOs, which are chief security officers, believe their boards allocate adequate budgets. So only 3 out of 10 of these guys think the company is spending enough money on it, which clearly they're not, given what's everything going on. And then 3 out of 10 also report that projects have been delayed or removed due to lack of funding. So there's going to be a mic drop here, a big fucking waterfall of cash coming into this space.
In their defense, though, you could argue that, like, how do you know you're allocating enough? Like, in similar to marketing, you could always keep
Right.
ramping up spend. I feel like it's always an afterthought. And the only time it becomes truly consequential is when, like, something horrible happens and, like, a crisis
Yeah.
emerges. And then
Yeah.
they're like, oh my God, why didn't we allocate more money to this? Like,
Yeah. Somebody's
same
getting
thing with,
fired.
like,
Yeah.
yeah. Same thing when like a PR campaign goes horrible and they're like, why didn't we like pay more people to check this work before it went out? And it's like, well, listen, you got to cut costs somewhere. But, I think that is the premise of this entire show, which is, where there is crisis, there is opportunity. Now, the insurance category for this, I think, could be really, really interesting. I think this is the multi-billion-dollar opportunity, which is, similar to what is happening in Florida, right? Because there's like a hurricane going on every single year. Like the likelihood that insurance companies are willing to underwrite like these, these coverage plans and such, I think is going to get, one, really, really expensive, but two, like most of them just aren't willing to do it. And I think the same thing is going to happen and probably is happening in cybersecurity, which is, hey, these companies can get hacked at any moment for any reason.
Yeah.
And, kind of to the ransom aspect of this is, just because a company got hacked, one time doesn't mean it can't happen again. Like,
Yeah.
also in a short period, like you can get hacked today and then also get hacked at the end of the week, right? When you get your systems up
Yo,
and running.
dude, I think there,
So-
I think there have been stories of hackers who've hacked a company and then like they'll get some ransom and then like a week later they're like, "Yo, I'm back." Like, where's my cash at?
That's insane. But yeah, I think there's probably a really creative way to offer this like a sense of security to these companies. Maybe I don't, again, like this is one of those things where like insurance is super nuanced and it's super regulated. So it's probably really, really hard. But if someone could apply a creative structure to this and find a reframing that makes sense, which is, hey, it's highly risky, but it's very consequential, and big companies and even small to medium-sized businesses who handle a lot of sensitive information are really willing to spend a lot of money to get some kind of coverage, because I think some kind of coverage is still better than nothing at all. And then like your company, in theory, being wiped out because of something that wasn't even in your control.
Yeah, I mean, there's a ton of plays just on the insurance market, right? Whether it's like building an API or like building the checklist of the things that company has or the underwriting models or the data, like whatever it is. So there's probably like businesses you can build to like serve the insurance companies to help them figure out who is worth insuring and you know who isn't and what's the spend threshold. The best thing about this industry is it's the Wild West. The rules haven't been written and there's a ton of bullshit happening. So there's a ton of like
Totally.
a smoke in the air to like essentially establish rules, establish standards. And then those are always going to be changing and expanding. Again, all this money is going in. Nobody really knows how much they should put in. So it's just like a great time to capitalize on like irrational expenditure and demand. And I think, you know, we'll see just these attacks rising. I don't want to be like this guy, but like if you're listening to this, like it might be a good time to be like a fucking cyber criminal. Like these guys are making hella money. Like they're getting paid their ransoms because it's worth it for the company to pay the ransom than be out of, you know, the software for months on end. Um, I
Yeah,
found
until
another
they
crazy
find your
stat.
ass and you go to prison.
Dude, they don't find a lot of these guys, bro. Like the FBI is not going to care about a $5 million ransom, like for a small health network. Like it's actually crazy. Apparently healthcare hacks have gone up like 239% in
Yeah,
particular.
makes sense.
And also another stat I found, it takes around 200 days on average to identify a data breach and 75 days to like act on it. So it's like, clearly nobody's doing this well. Like threat detection is also super latent. So I mean, shit.
Dude,
It's
you know what else could be super, super interesting? I bet the big consulting firms offer some kind of offer around this. But what if you could essentially build a services company where you go to all these small and medium-sized businesses who can't really afford to pay like the big bucks around like cybersecurity, and you just offer audits, right? So it could be like a one-time, you know, fee of some kind where they review your entire like stack against cybersecurity and tell you like how likely are you or like where your openings are for a potential breach. And like they can at least give you some kind of ideas on like holes that you need to plug. And then maybe if it's like a recurring model where they offer these audits and like they do these reviews every single month, just to kind of give you at least some exposure on like what is like if you were going to get screwed, like where is that going to happen and what are some prevention mechanisms to make it so that doesn't.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea as well. But from, you know, the kind of like going line in the industry is like, it's not technological error in these, most of these cases, it's human error. So it's a employee getting phished, making a mistake. You know, I've been like, been in the situations like this on Facebook Marketplace where like they'll try and verify my number on Google phone and like all this stuff. So it's a human problem. But that brings us into biometrics, which are much harder to fake than passwords and logins and email verification and two-step, right? Biometrics are, I
But
think,
what about like let's take that a step further. What about people who are more susceptible to breaches and like alerting them? So it's almost like they study the past history of like, you know, employees at the firm. And it kind of like highlights these people are more at risk of being targeted because like they're just more reckless
yeah,
with the way they're sharing information and
yeah.
data. And we should implement some kind of training around that. And it could be like a malicious thing, but it truly could be also just like an education thing. Like they just don't know better.
Dude, that actually makes me think of maybe even a stronger consumer angle around a Chrome extension that just monitors what's going on and it just flags like a situation where you may be giving away sensitive data on accident, right? Like, you know, when
Yeah.
grandma calls and she's like, yo, like the IRS says that I owe like 20,000 in back taxes, but I'm pretty sure I'm paid up. And it's like, grandma, that's like John at irs.net. Like that's not the right thing, you know? So that could be like an interesting, like just to check.
That
And
feels like a big idea. I feel like
yeah,
someone can make a lot of money doing this.
yeah,
Yeah.
just for consumers and like old people to not get, you know, throw away like their social security retirement benefits to some hacker in the Philippines. Um, it's so crazy, dude. Like it's really not that hard to do this. When my brother was in high school, we hacked the account of one of the teachers and we had the ability to like change people's grades and stuff. Like it was so easy. It was like a 16-year-old kid in his English class setting up a little modem and just like intercepting this data. Like It was like,
You know, if anyone is listening from like the fraud prevention agencies, I don't know if there's like government agencies around this. I'm sure there are, but you're like slowly climbing the ranks as this podcast keeps going on. He's just like
threat levels
talking
through the
about
roof.
like advocating for people to become criminals and talking about his own prior history and experience around this. Oh my gosh. I find something that's really interesting is like how quickly these companies are growing. So, two of the biggest names in cybersecurity as of recent have been Drada and Vanta, and I may be mispronouncing them, but Drada was started in mid 2020. They're already worth $2 billion.
Yeah.
Vanta started in 2018. They're worth 1.6, kind of approaching towards $2 billion as well. You could take the CrowdStrike example, like the guy may be crying on CNBC, but he's worth a cool $3 billion too. So like it is minting rich people day after day.
It's minting more billionaires than oil, than EVs, than like anything else, than AI, right? Like cybersecurity is what creating incredible personal fortunes. Wiz is another good example. Wiz started in 2020 and Google was looking to buy them for $23 billion, right? It was these 4 ex-Israeli intelligence operatives who built a startup called Adalom, and they sold that to Microsoft for $350 million. That was also a cyber company.
Wow.
And that was around file sharing. So it was perfect for a Microsoft acquisition, because file sharing, when Dropbox and Microsoft SharePoint and all these collaboration softwares came into market in the early 2010s, like that presented a massive opportunity for them. I think they sold it in like 2012, or maybe they got acquired in 2012. But then they just re-entered their cyberspace, but this time focused on cloud, right? Which is like the big growing category of data and operations for, the majority of big companies and everybody, right? It's just like everything lives on the cloud these days and not on premise. So they've scaled that up. They've been like insanely aggressive about hiring. They were focused on getting the biggest companies first. And the guy personally pitched Bernard Arnault to be a seed investor, and he ended up getting an LVMH deal. So he just went after the biggest companies first. And
that's crazy.
It was I think it's the fastest company ever to get to 100 million in revenue. I know a lot of people say that they were the first to get 100 million in revenue, but they did it in 18 months.
Yeah. I mean, the only other company that I can think who has had like similar scale in that time period is like Deal. Deal is like the other big company that I feel like.
Yeah, and that Parker Conrad's company, right? That
Rippling,
was it? Yeah.
Yeah. The HR company.
Why is it it's like HR and cyber, dude. It's like the departments of companies that you'd never want to talk to people in, that are like are like they're worth the most in terms of selling into them.
Yeah, I mean, what's crazy about the Wiz deal is it's a 46x multiple on their current revenue is what's being paid out if they end up selling for the $23 billion. So it goes to show just like how much Google and Alphabet like values this and like believe in the space. But also it's like, for them, it just makes so much sense. Like if you're going to target anybody to go hack, like Google and Alphabet is probably like at the top of the list.
Dude, 100%.
And I think with all this AI stuff going on, like it only makes it like even more important. One space that I think I'm really interested in is like this identity verification stuff. So, Clear has been one of those companies that I think they've had kind of a rocky past. I know it's like exchanged hands a few times. But my hunch is they will have their Nvidia moment in the next 5 to 10 years where like they really like become adopted on a mass scale. I imagine millions of people use them because they're in almost every single airport, and I know they're trying to expand out to stadiums and such, but they haven't exactly become like a household name, but I think that's going to change if they play their cards right.
That's a good take. I like that. That's a really interesting take, to think that they might have an Nvidia moment. I think really, if you look at companies having the biggest moat of their data, Clear has that. Clear has your iris.
Yeah.
Clear has your fucking iris, dude. Like the iris is harder to fake than any of the other biometrics, at least from what I've read. So the fact they have your eyeballs is insane. I think I made an Our Future video on that lady, and I was like, this lady made $1 billion like scanning your eyeballs. I mean, it's the most like sensitive part of the body, and it is incredibly valuable to have that information because it's so much more accurate to scan an eyeball up close than even do facial recognition from afar, or fingerprint can be spoofed much easier than iris, right? So like they have one of the most valuable data sets in America, right? If you really think about that company deeply.
You know what's also interesting about this is like you can take two different approaches. One is like you go for the unregulated space first, build up a lot of momentum, build up the case studies, and then you go in the unregulated space or go into the very regulated spaces, and then like hope they give you an opportunity. They played the game on extremely on very hard mode from the very beginning, like
Yeah.
going to airports and getting their buy-in. And proving out the model there is crazy. Like talk about like growth opportunities in the future. Like it'll only get easier and easier. Like
For
getting
them,
into
yeah.
an airport and essentially telling TSA like, hey, this is just as good as like TSA or some of the other offerings that they have. Like that is really, really hard. Like
Yeah.
trying to sell into airports is like one of the hardest things that you can do as like a founder.
Dude, it's almost like you're just doing the hard thing first so you'll have an easier time later and just can really have that dominance. Like nobody can touch you. Like that's a moat that nobody can touch. Another thing I love about that company is the branding. I just think Clear is such a cool brand. They have well-dressed employees, convenience. People hate going through security, but a brand that can help them feel a little bit more premium and elite goes a long way. So I think that lady, Carolyn Seidman Becker, she's actually a Michigan grad. Should hit her up. She nailed it in all the different ways. So more power to them as they grow. But that's just another example of a security startup,
For sure.
We should do something in this. We just need to find the right we should do it. We should just find the right opportunity that blends our really good ability to market and sell with cyber. And like, I'm not sure that these B2B like mechanisms are the way to do it, because you just need I feel like a massive outbound team, and like it's just very traditional trying to like push your way into these big long sales cycles. But like I think there's actually a ton of potential for consumer based cyber products. You know how these VPN companies have blown up? Like NordVPN is worth like, I don't know, I would assume they're worth hundreds, if not like $1 billion yet. They advertise with like every YouTuber, like these VPN companies, right? Like that's just another example of security based, like some network security. Like there's probably products that people will buy and need to have for consumer level protection. So I think that's another great angle to not get like your identity hacked or stolen.
Yeah, I also think the consumer side of it, people are becoming like very aware of like not wanting to share too much data. Like that's always been, a big struggle, but like especially even so more recently. Like usually it was like everybody was after Zuck, right? With the whole like Cambridge Analytica scandal, and like I think that really opened people's eyes, but DuckDuckGo is massive too, right? And that's literally like their only big differentiator, like, is the fact that it's something along this, right? Like that you can't share, they don't share information or something like this.
Yeah, privacy focused browser. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like shitty branding. And like, I can't imagine the UI is that much better, but
I
it's
think
a
it's like the second
company.
largest search engine in the world. Like it's like pretty elite. Like it's like
Yeah.
People who are worried about that kind of thing. But yeah, dude,
For sure.
we need to find the right thing. But I think if you want to make money, this is a really good space to get educated in. There's probably programs online to learn about cybersecurity. I bet you computer science programs are having like a dedicated professor being allotted to this. Like,
yeah, there's this other company I found in identity verification that I think is really interesting. So there's this founder in his mid-20s. His name is Eli Wax, and he's raised $20 million from Box Group and Index Ventures to build the Apple Pay for identity. So, his story is interesting. He was at Stanford, heard about the Cambridge Analytica and Facebook scandal, got really, really interested in it. Anytime you applied for a car or a credit card or a mortgage, you had to essentially fill out all this information and fill out all these forms. But for the company, it exposes them to a lot of risk, because after they do whatever, process that they have in place to verify, they now have to store this information, and it kind of exposes them to potential privacy breaches and security issues down the road. So he is essentially building, this trusted middleman with his company Footprint, which will hold all of your information in this protected security enclave. And then using biometric verification, so think like Face ID, they enable you to share this information super quickly, super easily. The company claims that its solution is 12 times faster faster and 2 times cheaper than other solutions out there. But I do find this really interesting because, I think there is an added level of friction for a hacker to try to come in and steal this information. But at the same time, if someone does hack this, they now have
Yeah.
even more sensitive information that, in their fingertips. That said, enterprises are spending upwards of $10 billion a year on identity verification. And I think this number is just going to keep growing since, online identity theft is skyrocketing and, there's all these issues taking place.
Dude, I love this. It almost feels like a Google autofill for applications of any kind. I mean, it's annoying enough to enter your address on when you're getting an e-commerce product. And I know there have been solutions to that save that, for example, like Shop Pay or something along those lines. So I love these like integrated web app type businesses that, whether it's like, I think 1Password's another good example. I think they're valued at a few billion. LastPass, right? Like, I think these are really smart products. Consumers are able to use and transact more quickly. And I think it does take risk off the company's plate. But you're right. Like if this company does get hacked, they've essentially made it even easier to attribute identity to specific information, right? If there's just one identity in there, now you know who's who, right? Instead of pulling it from one company and another and trying to connect the data sets and doing a lot of that, back of the envelope dark web shit where you're trying to attribute profiles and personalities to all the data that you get. But it almost reminds me of like not API. I think
there's trade-offs.
There's trade-offs. They've just got to be secure as hell. Like whoever's going to secure them better be like elite. Like hopefully it's not CrowdStrike, but they best be the best out there. But yeah, I mean, if you're trying to build like essentially like a sperm bank for everybody, you better make sure that shit's protected.
Well, makes me think the big thing in fintech, like the past several years, has been embedded finance. This is like the buzzword that everyone talks about. And we have friends who are building companies in the space that enable this in one way or whatever, right? Like they're doing the Stripe for X or the Stripe for Y. And those companies are doing really well. But to some aspects, this feels a little bit like this play in the cybersecurity aspect, right? Like embedding this sensitive information to enable easy access, but it is more secure than your current alternatives. I don't know. I just feel like there's a lot of different ways you could take this because, I see the value from the consumer's perspective, but I'm not so bought from the company's perspective, right? Like, yes, this does make it easier, and yes, I do have risk. But if you get hacked, right, and like this person is going to get screwed across everything. They're going to get screwed across like their car loan.
I think that's the question everybody probably asks, but I assume that this company is going to spend all their venture dollars on having the best security team, the best protocols, the most encrypted shit, right? Like that's the only way that they would even get funded is if they were just complete
for
experts.
Sure. I don't disagree with you. I think that is the pitch.
I'm recruiting from the CIA for this business. You know what I mean? I'm trying to build the most secure vault out there.
For sure. I don't disagree with you. I think that would make sense and that pitch is sound, but I'm talking about the end company's perspective. Like, I think that maybe one play here is just focusing on a specific space. So can you embed it so it makes it super easy just for the insurance industry or just for banking?
Yeah.
That's probably the approach I would take rather than trying to create an all-in-one stop across every single industry in various regulated spaces where they all have their own criteria and issues that they have to deal with. I don't know if I'd want to take on the risk because similar to like what's happening with CrowdStrike, it's like when you do go down, you take down everybody with you. And I don't know if I'd want to play that game.
Yes, you'd want to be insulated to one space. I think that makes sense. It also makes sense from a product perspective to build for a specific vertical. But yeah, I think for credit card applications, loan applications, car leases, it makes a ton of sense to do a one click to share the information over, secure API, the data is held somewhere, the company's lending underwriting model speaks to it, and boom, it's back to footprint. So
he's like, boom, $1 billion company.
Boom. Dude's gonna be rich.
Just that easy.
Yeah. You got me thinking, man. Let's go put pen to paper on some ideas because this is where the money's at. This is like bread and butter, our future podcast. It's great.
And they said cybersecurity was boring, man. It's as sexy as it comes. It's minting billionaires over here.
Cybersecurity is the new AI, baby. Thank you, everybody, for listening to this episode of Our Future Podcast. We love doing this. We, are enjoying bringing it into more like current events and just aggregating more stories for you guys instead of just focusing on two. So leave us your comments, feedback in the, down below, and
trends.
make sure to subscribe.
We want to bring in more data. We want to talk about more opportunities. So if that's what you want to hear, let us know.
Yeah, let us know if you like the format. All right. Stay frosty, everybody. Peace out.
Stay frosty.